My dad handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar logistics empire to my brother, who cannot even spell logistics, while sneering that I would not get a single cent. He looked me dead in the eye and told me that as a woman my only job was to marry well and get out of his sight. He thought he had crushed me. He thought he had won. But he did not see my mother slide a black envelope across the mahogany table while he was busy pouring champagne. He did not know that envelope contained the power to strip him of his title, his house, and his dignity. It is time to tell them who really owns this family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated your worth just because you did not fit their mold. My name is Zola King, and I am 32 years old, standing in the foyer of my grandfather Otis' grand estate in Buckhead, Atlanta. I felt like a ghost in my own history. It was the day of the funeral repast. The house was filled with the heavy scent of Lily's fried chicken and expensive perfume. This was not just a home, it was a monument. Grandpa Otis had built King Logistics from a single beat-up truck into a fleet that dominated the Southeast. Every brick in this house was paid for by his sweat. But as I moved through the crowded living room collecting discarded paper plates and empty wine glasses, I realized that to my family, I was nothing more than the help. Zola, get more ice. Zola, someone spilled red wine on the sofa. Zola, move your car so the guests can park. I did it all without complaint because I respected Grandpa too much to cause a scene on the day of his homegoing. But my silence was apparently interpreted as permission to be disrespected. I walked into the library, the sanctuary where Grandpa used to teach me how to read balance sheets when I was 10. Standing there was my sister-in-law, Brittany. She was wearing a black dress that was inappropriate for a funeral, and her heels were digging into the antique Persian rug Grandpa had brought back from Morocco. She was waving a glass of Chardonnay around, gesturing at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "You know, Trey," she said loudly, her voice grating against my nerves. "This place is huge, but it smells so old, like mothballs and dusty paper. When we move in, we should gut this room completely. It would make a fantastic yoga studio with floor-to-ceiling mirrors." I froze, holding a stack of dirty plates. "Brittany, this is a library," I said, keeping my voice low. "Those books are first editions. Grandpa spent 50 years collecting them." Brittany turned to look at me, her blue eyes widening in feigned innocence. "Oh, Zola, I did not see you there blending into the background." She took a sip of her wine and smirked. "I am just saying the energy in here is very stagnant. It needs to be modernized. Besides, Trey says books are obsolete anyway. Everything is digital now." "Right, babe." She looked over at my brother Trey. At 34, Trey was the golden boy of the family. He was handsome, charming, and completely useless. He was currently lounging in Grandpa leather armchair, holding a bottle of Hennessy that he had already half emptied. "Yeah, whatever Brittany wants," Trey slurred slightly, waving his hand dismissively. "We will rip it all out, sell the books. Who reads anymore?" My grip tightened on the plates. Sell the books, rip it out. They were talking about erasing my grandfather's legacy before his body was even cold in the ground. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. "You are not ripping anything out. This house is part of the estate. Nothing is decided yet." Trey laughed, a wet, heavy sound. "Relax, Zola. You are always so uptight. That is probably why you are still single at 32. Dad already told me the plan. I am the man of the house now. That is how legacy works. It goes from king to king, not to, whatever you are, a secretary." "I am a data analyst," I corrected him automatically, though I knew it was a waste of breath. They thought I spent my days typing numbers into Excel sheets for a peanut salary. They had no idea I was actually a strategic financial consultant for Fortune 500 companies, effectively a ghost CFO for businesses 3 times the size of King Logistics. I kept my life separate because I knew this family would only see me as a bank account if they knew the truth. Speaking of being the man of the house, Trey stood up, swaying slightly. "I think I am going to take the old Ford for a spin, a tribute to the old man." He was talking about the 1970 Ford F-100 fully restored that sat in the garage. It was Grandpa pride and joy. He never let anyone drive it, not even Dad. Trey, you are drunk, I said, putting the plates down on a side table. You are not driving anything. Who is going to stop me? You. Trey sneered. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Dad gave them to me this morning. Said the torch has been passed. Watch me work, little sister. He pushed past me, knocking into my shoulder. Brittany followed him, giggling like a schoolgirl. Let him have his moment, Zola, she said, patting my arm condescendingly. Do not be such a buzzkill. It is his inheritance after all. I followed them out to the driveway, my heart pounding. The rain had started to fall, a heavy Atlanta summer downpour that turned the sky gray. Guests were mingling on the porch, watching as Trey stumbled toward the pristine vintage truck. Trey, stop! I shouted, rushing down the steps. He ignored me, climbing into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, a beast waking up. He revved it aggressively, causing the guests to gasp and murmur. He threw the truck into reverse without looking. Trey, look out. It happened in slow motion. He slammed on the gas pedal. The truck shot backward, tires screeching on the wet pavement. He lost control immediately. The heavy steel bumper of the vintage truck smashed directly into the limestone pillar of the front gate. Crunch. The sound was sickening. Metal twisting against stone. One of the headlights shattered instantly. The truck stalled. Smoke hissed from the radiator. For a second there was total silence. Then the front door of the house banged open. My father, Reginald King, marched out. He was a tall, imposing man who wore his grief like a suit of armor, but right now his face was twisted in rage. What the hell is going on? He bellowed. Trey stumbled out of the truck, unharmed but pale. He looked at the smashed front end of the truck, then at Dad. I do not know what happened, Dad. The brakes. The pavement was slippery. My father looked at the truck. His father's beloved truck now ruined. Then he looked at Trey, and then slowly, his eyes shifted to me. Zola, he roared. I stood there stunned by the rain and the shock. Me? I asked. You are the oldest, my father shouted, walking down the steps and getting right in my face. You were out here. Why did you let him drive? You knew he had been drinking. I tried to stop him. I protested, my voice shaking with disbelief. He had the keys. You gave him the keys. Do not talk back to me, my father snapped, poking a finger into my chest. You should have taken them. You should have been responsible. But no, you are always jealous of your brother. You probably wanted him to crash. You wanted to embarrass him in front of everyone. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. Brittany was standing by the truck, checking her phone, completely unbothered. Trey was looking at his shoes, playing the victim, and I was standing in the rain taking the blame for a 34-year-old man's reckless behavior. This is ridiculous, I said, pushing his hand away. I am not his babysitter, Dad, and I am not your punching bag. My father's eyes narrowed. You are what I say you are, Zola, and right now you are an embarrassment. Get inside. Mr. Henderson is here. We are going to settle this estate right now so I can make sure this family is led by someone with actual competence. He put his arm around Trey, leading him back into the house. It is okay, son, my father said, his voice instantly softening. It is just a truck. We can fix it, or buy a new one. You are the priority. I watched them walk away, leaving me in the rain. I wiped the water from my face. It was mixed with tears of frustration, but I refused to let them fall. I followed them inside. In the grand living room, Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, was sitting at the head of the table. He was a kind man with white hair who had served my grandfather for 30 years. He looked uncomfortable as my father poured himself a stiff drink and sat down, pulling Trey into the chair next to him. My mother Viola sat in the corner. She was staring at her hands. She had not said a word all day. She looked small and defeated. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Reginald, considering the circumstances, perhaps we should wait a few days to discuss the legal matters. The funeral was just... No, My father interrupted, slamming his glass down. We do it now. I want everything clear. I want everyone to know where they stand. Mr. Henderson sighed and opened his briefcase. Very well. As you know, Otis died suddenly. We have searched the safe and the bank deposit box. There is no will. A murmur went through the room. No will. For a man as meticulous as Grandpa, it seemed impossible. Since there is no will, Mr. Henderson continued peering over his glasses under Georgia law, the estate is considered intestate. This means the assets, including the company, the properties, and the liquid cash, are to be divided equally between the surviving spouse and the children. He looked at us. That means Viola gets a share, and Reginald gets a share, and since Otis loved his grandchildren, he often spoke of— Stop right there, my father said, raising his hand. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. Viola has already agreed that she is not in a state to manage complex assets. She has signed a quitclaim deed transferring her administrative rights and her share of the real estate to me. Is that right, Viola? He did not even look at her. He just stared at the paper. Mom looked up. Her eyes met mine for a split second. There was something there I could not read. Fear. Or maybe apology. Yes, Reggie, she whispered. Good, my father said. So that leaves me as the sole administrator. And as the head of this family, I have made a decision. He stood up, looking around the room, making sure every aunt, cousin, and family friend was listening. King Logistics needs a strong male leader. It needs continuity. Therefore, I am transferring the majority ownership of the company and this house to my son, Trey King. Brittany squealed with delight and clapped her hands. Trey puffed out his chest, forgetting that he had just wrecked a car 10 minutes ago. And Zola. I asked, my voice cutting through the applause. My father looked at me with a cold sneer that chilled me more than the rain outside. You Zola. You are a girl. You will get married one day and change your name. You do not carry the legacy. You can have the old station wagon, and you can take your personal items from your room. But I want you out of this house by tonight. Brittany needs your room for her closet space. The room went silent. You are kicking me out, I asked quietly. I am pruning the dead weight, my father said. I looked at Trey, who was smirking. I looked at Brittany, who was already measuring the windows with her eyes. And then I looked at my mother. She did not look up. But under the table I saw her hand move toward her purse. Fine, I said. I turned around and walked toward the door. My heart was breaking, but my head was starting to clear. Where are you going, Zola? My father called out mockingly. To cry in your car. No, Dad, I said without looking back. I am going to get my coat. But as I walked out into the dark, rainy night, I knew one thing. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a war. And they had just armed the enemy. The air in the library was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Henderson wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked at my father, and then at the stack of legal documents on the heavy oak desk. The silence stretched tight like a rubber band ready to snap. My father, Reginald, sat at the head of the table like a king on a throne, his fingers drumming a rhythmic, impatient beat against the wood. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat again, his voice trembling slightly. As I was explaining, Reginald, since Otis passed without a valid will, the state of Georgia declares the estate intestate. The law is quite specific about this. The assets are not automatically transferred to the eldest son. They are to be divided equally between the surviving spouse and all biological children. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at me. That means legally the company and the estate belong to Viola, yourself, and Zola equally. 1/3 each. My heart skipped a beat. 1/3? That was fair. That was what Grandpa would have wanted. I did not want to control everything, I just wanted a seat at the table. I wanted to protect the company from being run into the ground. But my father let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. He did not even look at the lawyer. His eyes were fixed on my mother, who was shrinking into her chair, trying to make herself invisible. The law does not run this family, Henderson, my father said, his voice low and dangerous. I do. And my wife understands her place. Don't you, Viola? He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table toward her. It made a dry, rasping sound that echoed in the quiet room. This is a quitclaim deed, my father announced, not to us, but to the room at large. By signing this, Viola voluntarily relinquishes all her claims to the estate, the real estate, and the company shares. She transfers full executive power and ownership to me. Immediately. Mr. Henderson looked alarmed. Reginald, I must advise against this. Viola essentially signing away her financial security. If you were to divorce, or if something were to happen to you, she would be left with absolutely nothing. Viola, you do not have to sign this. You have rights. My mother looked up then. Her eyes were rimmed with red dark circles shadowed underneath them. She looked at the pen my father was holding out to her. Then she looked at his face. I saw the fear there. A lifetime of being silenced. A lifetime of walking on eggshells around a man whose ego was more fragile than glass. Reggie, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Are you sure this is best? My father leaned in close, his voice dropping to a hiss that made the hair on my arms stand up. Do you want to destroy this family, Viola? Do you want to complicate things with lawyers and judges? Do you trust me to take care of you or not? Sign the paper. It was not a question. It was a command. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump across the table and snatch the pen away. Mom, don't do it, I thought. Fight back. Just once fight back. But she didn't. Her hand shook as she took the pen. The scratching of the nib against the paper sounded like a scream in the silence. She signed her name, Viola King. Just like that, she gave away her power. My father smiled a cold, satisfied smile. He snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry and handed it to the stunned lawyer. File that he ordered. Now regarding the children. He turned his chair to face Trey and me. The difference in how he looked at us was night and day. When he looked at Trey, his eyes softened, filled with a blind pride. When he looked at me, they hardened into stone. Trey, my father said, his voice booming with importance. You are a man. You carry the King name. It is your birthright to lead. Therefore, I am appointing you as the new CEO of King Logistics, effective immediately. The entire fleet, the warehouses, and the contracts are under your command. Trey grinned, leaning back and crossing his arms. Thanks, Dad. About time. I have got some big ideas. We need to rebrand, get rid of those old trucks. My father nodded, ignoring the fact that Trey had just wrecked one of those trucks. And this house, he continued, waving his hand around the magnificent library. This estate is the seat of our family power. It belongs to the head of the household. It belongs to you, Trey. Brittany let out a squeal of delight that pierced my eardrums. Oh my God, she shrieked, clutching Trey's arm. Babe, we are going to own the mansion. I can finally get rid of those awful drapes in the parlor. And Zola room. Oh, wait. She stopped and looked at me, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. That brings us to you, Zola, my father said, turning to me. I sat up straighter, bracing myself. You are a girl, he said simply, as if that explained everything. You will eventually marry some man and change your name. You do not build legacies, you support them. You have a job, right? Some clerical thing. I manage data, I said through gritted teeth. Right. Typing, my father scoffed. Well, you do not need a logistics empire to type. And you certainly do not need a share of this estate. It would just confuse things. You would probably sell your shares to some competitor or let your emotions get in the way of business. So I get nothing, I asked, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. Grandpa built this company for all of us. I spent every summer in those warehouses. I know the routes better than Trey. I know the drivers. You know how to fetch coffee? My father interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. Do not confuse proximity with ability, Zola. You get nothing because you are owed nothing. But because I am a generous father, I am not leaving you empty-handed. He reached into his pocket and tossed a set of keys across the table. They slid across the wood and fell onto my lap. I looked down. It was a single car key with a faded plastic fob. The '98 Taurus, my father said. It is in the back shed. Needs a jump start probably, but it runs. It is yours. Consider it your inheritance, the Taurus. The rusted beige sedan that had been sitting under a tarp for 6 years. He was giving me a piece of junk while handing my brother a multi-million-dollar empire. Is this a joke? I asked, gripping the key so hard it cut into my palm. You should be grateful, Brittany chimed in, inspecting her manicure. Most parents do not give their adult children cars. You are lucky, Reggie is so sweet. And one more thing, my father added, ignoring my question. Since this house now belongs to Trey and Brittany, they need their privacy. A young couple needs space to build their life. Brittany mentioned she needs a dedicated space for her designer handbags and accessories. I looked at Brittany. She was beaming. I have always wanted a walk-in closet with an island, she said. And your room, Zola? It has the best light. It is perfect. My father nodded. Exactly. So Zola, I want you packed and out by tonight. You are 32 years old. It is embarrassing that you still have a room here. Take your clothes, take your little computer and go. You are evicting me. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. Tonight. It is pouring rain outside. You have a car, my father pointed at the key in my hand. And I am sure you have friends. Or maybe you can sleep in that office of yours. Either way, you are no longer a resident of this estate. You are a guest. And guests who overstay their welcome are trespassers. I looked at my mother. She had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face silently. But she did not say a word. She did not look at me. She just sat there letting it happen. Fine, I said. My voice was deadly calm. I will leave. But remember this, Dad. You think you are building a legacy today, but you are digging a grave. You just handed a loaded gun to a toddler. I pointed at Trey, who laughed and flipped me off. Get out! Zola, my father roared, standing up and pointing at the door. Get out before I have security throw you out. I did not look back. I walked out of the library down the long hallway lined with portraits of ancestors who would be rolling in their graves. I went upstairs to my room, the room I had grown up in. I did not pack everything. I only took what mattered. My laptop, my hard drive, and the framed photo of Grandpa Otis that sat on my nightstand. I left the clothes. I left the furniture. I left the life I had known. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the driveway. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking me to the bone instantly. I walked around to the back shed. There it was. The beige Ford Taurus covered in dust and cobwebs. I unlocked the door. The interior smelled like mildew and old oil. I put the key in the ignition and prayed. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then miraculously groaned to life. As I backed the car out, the front door of the mansion opened. Brittany and Trey stood there under the shelter of the porch, holding glasses of champagne. They watched me. Brittany gave a little wave, a mocking goodbye. I drove toward the massive iron gates. As I passed through them, I saw the security guard pressing the button. The gates began to close slowly, majestically, sealing the King estate off from the world. And from me. I watched in the rearview mirror as the heavy iron bars slammed shut with a final resounding clang. I was on the outside, disowned, disinherited, replaced by a handbag collection. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears, hot and angry, mixed with the rain on my face. Let them have the house. Let them have the trucks. They did not know what was coming. They thought they had thrown out the trash, but they had just unleashed a storm. I was not just Zola, the data entry clerk, anymore. I was Zola King, owner of Lioness LLC, and I was about to show them exactly what a woman could do. The rain hammered against the roof of the rusted Ford Taurus, sounding like handfuls of gravel being thrown at a tin can. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and mildew, a scent that belonged to a past I wanted nothing to do with. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my entire body shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage so pure and hot, it felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. I stared through the foggy windshield at the mansion. The lights were glowing warmly from the library where my father and brother were probably toasting to their victory with 50-year-old scotch. They were celebrating erasing me. They were laughing at how easy it was to discard Zola, the girl who was good with numbers, but bad at being a man. I reached for the ignition key, ready to drive away and never look back. I would go to my penthouse in Midtown. I would bury myself in work. I would pretend the name King meant nothing to me. Suddenly, a sharp rap on the passenger window made me jump. I looked over. A figure was standing in the pouring rain, hooded and hunched over. It was my mother. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to lock the doors and speed away. She had sat there silent. She had signed that quitclaim deed without a fight. She had let him throw me out. But the look on her face through the streaked glass stopped me. She did not look like the broken woman from the library. Her eyes were wide, urgent, and fierce. I unlocked the door. She slipped into the passenger seat, bringing a gust of cold, wet air with her. She pushed back her hood, water dripping from her hair onto the cracked leather seat. She did not try to hug me. She did not apologize. She just reached into her coat. "Go back inside, Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "Go back to your master. He might need you to sign away your soul next." "Zola, listen to me," she hissed. Her voice was sharp, completely unlike the whisper she used around Dad. "Stop feeling sorry for yourself for 1 second, and listen." I stared at her, shocked by her tone. "You think I am weak?" she said, staring straight ahead at the mansion. "You think I let him walk all over me because I am scared? Maybe I am. Your father is a bully, Zola. He has always been a bully. But your grandfather Otis, he was not blind. Grandpa is dead," I said bitterly. "And he left no will. So Dad wins." No, Mom turned to me, her eyes blazing. Grandpa knew this day would come. He knew Reggie Ego would destroy this family. He knew Trey was a fool who would sell the company for a fast car. And he knew that you were the only one with the spine to save his legacy. "Then why didn't he write a will?" I shouted, slamming my hand on the dashboard. "Why did he leave me with nothing?" "He didn't," she said quietly. "He left you with the nuclear option." She pulled a thick black envelope from inside her coat. It was dry, protected by plastic. She placed it on the center console between us. It looked heavy, ominous. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it." My hands were trembling as I broke the seal. Inside there were 2 sets of documents. The paper was heavy, official, and smelled of fresh ink. I pulled out the first document. Articles of incorporation for a company called Lioness LLC. I frowned. I had seen this name before, in the company ledgers. Lioness LLC was a silent partner that held a significant amount of preferred stock in King Logistics. I looked at the date. It was formed 5 years ago. "Now look at the second one," Mom said. I pulled out the second document. It was a call option agreement. My eyes scanned the legal jargon faster than my brain could process it. It was a contract between Otis King and Lioness LLC. It stated that in the event of Otis King death, or if the company debt-to-equity ratio exceeded a certain limit, Lioness LLC had the immediate right to purchase 51% of the voting shares of King Logistics for a nominal fee of $1. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Otis King. And next to it, the signature for the representative of Lioness LLC. It was my signature. Zola King. I gasped, dropping the paper. I never signed this." Mom smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You did. 5 years ago. Remember when Grandpa asked you to sign those papers for your college trust fund renewal? He slipped this in. He made you the owner of Lioness LLC Zola. He has been funneling his personal dividends into this shell company for years. I stared at the papers. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. So, you are saying, I whispered. I am saying your father thinks he inherited an empire, Mom said, leaning closer. But he only inherited the throne. You, Zola, you own the kingdom. You have the legal right to take majority control of King Logistics the moment you choose to execute this option. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, tears springing to my eyes again, but this time they were different. They were tears of shock, of vindication. Because you were not ready, Mom said, reaching out to touch my hand. And because Grandpa wanted to give your father one last chance. He hoped Reggie would do the right thing. He hoped he would share. But tonight proved he never will. She looked out the window at the house where Trey was probably popping another bottle of champagne. Your father thinks power is about shouting the loudest, Mom said softly. He does not know that real power is silent. It waits. She squeezed my hand, then let go. I have to go back before he notices I am gone. If he asks, I was checking the mail. Mom opened the door and the sound of the rain rushed back in, filling the car. But the cold didn't bother me anymore. Mom, I called out just before she stepped out. She paused, looking back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said, her face hardening into a mask of resolve. Just make sure when you take them down, you don't miss. She slammed the door and ran back through the rain, disappearing into the shadows of the house. I sat there for a long moment, alone in the dark. The silence in the car was no longer oppressive. It was heavy with potential. I looked at the black envelope. I looked at the mansion looming over me, a fortress of arrogance and greed. My father thought he had cast me out. He thought I was driving away in a broken-down Taurus to cry myself to sleep in a studio apartment. Slowly, I reached up and wiped the tears from my cheeks. My hand was steady now. My breathing was deep and controlled. I picked up the documents and slid them carefully back into the envelope. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was the latest model, a tool of my trade, not the toy of a receptionist. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Marcus. My executive assistant at ZO Holdings, my real company. I pressed call. It rang once. Zola. Marcus answered immediately, professional and alert despite the late hour. I thought you were at the funeral. Is everything okay? No, Marcus? I said, my voice low and cold, devoid of any emotion. Everything is not okay, but it is about to be corrected. I paused, looking at the lit-up window of the library. I could see my brother's silhouette, raising a glass. Initiate the lion protocol, I said. There was a brief pause on the other end. Marcus knew what that meant. We had war-gamed this scenario years ago just in case. Are you sure, Zola? Marcus asked quietly. Once we start this, there is no going back. This is a hostile takeover. It is your family. I put the car in gear. The engine purred. It didn't sound like a piece of junk anymore. It sounded like a tank. I have no family, I said, staring at the house one last time. I only have targets. Execute the option, Marcus, and schedule a board meeting. I think it is time the new majority shareholder introduced herself. I hung up the phone. I did not speed away. I drove slowly, deliberately down the long driveway. The iron gates opened to let me out. As I turned onto the main road, leaving the King estate behind, a smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized the cage door was open. They wanted a war. They wanted to play games with legacy and inheritance. Fine. I checked my rearview mirror, watching the mansion disappear into the rainy night. Let the hunt begin. The next morning, the sun rose over Atlanta, casting long, sharp shadows across the city skyline. But for the first time in years, I did not wake up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I woke up in my own bed in my penthouse apartment overlooking Piedmont Park. The threadbare sheets of my childhood room were a memory. Here everything was crisp white Egyptian cotton. I stood before my floor-to-ceiling mirror and looked at the woman staring back. The mousy girl in the oversized cardigan, who fetched coffee and data entry files, was gone. In her place stood Zola King, CEO of ZO Holdings. I smoothed the lapels of my crimson-tailored suit, pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant bun, and applied a shade of lipstick that was dark enough to look like dried blood. I took the elevator down to the private garage. I walked past the rusted Ford Taurus I had parked in the far corner the night before. It looked like a scar among the sleek lines of my neighbors' Porsches and Maseratis. I patted its hood affectionately. That car was my Trojan horse. But today, I did not need a disguise. I climbed into my actual car, a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon, with tinted windows, and drove the short distance to my office in the financial district. When I walked into the lobby of the Sovereign Building, the security guard straightened up and tipped his hat. "Good morning, Ms. King." "Good morning, Earl," I replied, not stopping. I took the private elevator straight to the 45th floor. The doors slid open, revealing the polished chrome and glass office of ZO Holdings. My staff was already buzzing with activity. These people knew me as the ruthless financial strategist who saved failing companies from bankruptcy, not the disappointment of the King family. My executive assistant Marcus was waiting at my door with a double espresso and a tablet. He looked tired but focused. "We have access, Zola," he said, falling into step beside me. "The Lioness protocol is active. We have mirrored the King logistics server. You can see everything in real time." I walked into my corner office and sat behind my obsidian desk. On the wall, 3 large monitors flickered to life. I did not waste time. "Show me," I said. Marcus tapped a few keys and the financial guts of my family business spilled across the screens. It was worse than I thought, much worse. I spent the next 2 hours dissecting the accounts. My father thought running a logistics company was just about shouting orders at truck drivers. He had no idea that the cash flow was hemorrhaging. And then I saw it. A series of recurring payments labeled simply as consulting fees. They were massive. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. All transferred to a generic account in the Cayman Islands. "Who is the consultant?" I asked, zooming in on the transaction dates. Marcus pulled up a background check on the side screen. "There is no consultant. The account is linked to an online gambling portal, sport betting and high-stakes poker, and the IP address authorizing the transfers comes from inside the King estate, specifically from the master bedroom wing." "Trey," I whispered. "My brother, the new CEO. He was not just incompetent, he was a thief. He was stealing from the company to fund a gambling addiction while telling Dad he was investing in the future. He has drained the operating capital to dangerously low levels," Marcus noted, his voice grim. "If they miss one payroll, the drivers will strike. The fleet will be grounded within 2 weeks." I leaned back in my chair, watching the numbers turn red on the screen. It was a disaster. But it was also the leverage I needed. My father had handed the keys to a junkie and he was too proud to check the gas tank. Suddenly, my personal cell phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the caller ID. Dad. I stared at the screen for a moment. The audacity was breathtaking. He had kicked me out into the rain less than 12 hours ago. He had told me I was dead to him. And now he was calling. I picked up the phone and put it on speaker. I did not say hello. I just listened. "Zola. Where the hell are you?" My father's voice barked, filling my pristine office with his toxicity. "I am at work," I said coolly. "Why?" "Don't you take that tone with me," he snapped. "I called the house landline, and you weren't there. I assumed you were sulking somewhere. Look, I need you to transfer your monthly contribution. Today." I almost laughed. For 10 years I had been paying 20% of my salary, the salary I earned from my secret consulting work, not the peanuts he thought I made, to the family account. He called it room and board. I called it protection money to keep the peace. "You want money?" I asked, swiveling my chair to look out at the city. Obviously he huffed. "Trey needs cash for gas. He is taking the new Escalade to a meeting with some investors, and the company credit card is temporarily frozen. Bank error or something. We need 2,000. Transfer it now." I will let you back into the house to pick up the rest of your junk if you do it quickly." The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at the screen showing the thousands of dollars Trey had gambled away just last night. Bank error. No. Maxed out. "Dad," I said, my voice steady and sharp as a scalpel, "I think you are confused. You evicted me. Remember, you said I was a guest who overstayed her welcome." "So what?" he yelled. "You are still my daughter. You still owe me for raising you. Do not be petty, Zola. Trey is the CEO now. He needs support. When he lands this deal, we will all benefit. Now send the money." "No." The word hung in the air. Simple. Absolute. "Excuse me," my father sputtered. "What did you say?" I said, "No, I am not sending you money. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again." "You ungrateful little brat," he screamed, and I could hear the veins popping in his neck. "After everything I gave you a car, I gave you a roof. You gave me a rusted Taurus and a complex. I cut him off. And yesterday, you gave me my freedom. You said Trey is the man. You said he is the leader. Well, if he is such a great businessman, let him figure out how to pay for his own gas. Zola, if you do not transfer that money, I will—" "You will what I asked," leaning forward. "You will disinherit me. You already did. You will kick me out. You already did. You have nothing left to threaten me with, Dad. The Bank of Zola is closed, permanently." There was a stunned silence on the other end. He had never heard me speak like this. He was used to the quiet girl who apologized for existing. He did not know he was talking to the lioness. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally severing the limb that had been poisoning me for years. Marcus was watching me with a look of respect. "What do we do now?" he asked. I turned back to the monitors where the financial rot of King Logistics was displayed in high definition. "Now," I said, tapping the screen, "we let them starve, block any attempt they make to get loans from our partner banks, flag their credit rating. And Marcus? Keep a close eye on those gambling transfers. When Trey gets desperate, he will stop skimming off the top and start selling assets. That is when we strike." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the tiny cars moving on the street below. Somewhere down there, my brother was driving a luxury SUV he could not afford, fueled by his ego. My father was pacing in his library, wondering why his control tactics were no longer working. They were about to find out that without me keeping the ship afloat, they were already drowning. The double life was over. There was only Zola King now, and I was done serving. I was ready to conquer. 30 days. That was all it took for the empire my grandfather spent 50 years building to begin crumbling like a sandcastle in high tide. From my office on the 45th floor, I watched the destruction happen in real time. I did not intervene. I did not call my father to warn him. I simply watched the monitors documenting every foolish decision, every reckless expense, and every betrayal of the King legacy. The silence from my end was deafening, and I knew it was driving my father insane. He expected me to come crawling back to beg for forgiveness or to offer to fix the mess Trey was making. He did not know that I was not looking for a way back in. I was waiting for them to burn the house down so I could buy the ashes. The first casualty was the staff. Mr. Abernathy, the operations manager who had been with King Logistics since before I was born, was fired on a Tuesday morning. Trey did not even have the decency to do it face to face. He sent an email, a 2-sentence email terminating a man who knew the name of every driver and the maintenance schedule of every truck. By Wednesday, Mr. Abernathy was replaced by a guy named Chad. Chad was one of Trey's college buddies, a man whose only qualification was that he knew how to mix a margarita and agreed with everything Trey said. I saw the payroll changes hit the system. Chad was being paid double Mr. Abernathy's salary. Meanwhile, the veteran drivers were having their overtime cut. I could see the morale plummeting through the internal chat logs which I still had access to. The drivers were angry. They were whispering about a strike. but Trey was too busy test-driving luxury cars to notice the storm brewing in the break room. Then came the looting. Brittany, having secured her position as the lady of the manor, began her campaign to erase my grandfather from his own home. She called it decluttering. I called it desecration. She started listing items on high-end auction sites. The antique mahogany dining table where we had eaten every Christmas dinner was sold for a fraction of its value to a buyer in Miami. The Persian rugs were rolled up and replaced with white shag carpets that looked cheap and soulless. I set up alerts on every auction platform. Every time Brittany listed something, I had a proxy buyer purchase it immediately. I filled a storage unit in downtown Atlanta with my family's history, buying back my own inheritance one piece at a time. My father had no idea. He probably thought the sudden influx of cash was due to Brittany's business acumen. He did not realize it was my money flowing back into their pockets, keeping them afloat just a little longer. But the breaking point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I received a text from a neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who had lived next door to the King estate for decades. She sent me a photo of a large dumpster sitting in the driveway. It was filled with black trash bags. But on top of the pile, exposed to the rain, was a crate. A wooden milk crate that I recognized instantly. It was Grandpa Otis's jazz collection. I grabbed my coat and ran to the elevator. That collection was priceless. First pressings of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Thelonious Monk. Grandpa used to play them on Sunday mornings, filling the house with music while he drank his coffee. He treated those records like holy relics, and Brittany had thrown them in a dumpster like garbage. I drove the Mercedes G-Wagon, but I did not pull into the driveway. I parked down the street and waited for the sanitation truck. When it arrived, I intercepted the driver. I slipped him $200 to let me dig through the trash. The rain was ruining my silk blouse, but I did not care. I climbed into the dumpster, pushing aside bags of kitchen waste and discarded clothes. I found the crate. The cardboard sleeves were damp, but the vinyl inside was still protected. I pulled out a copy of Kind of Blue. It was the record Grandpa played the day he taught me how to drive. I clutched the crate to my chest, standing in the rain, filled with a cold, dark hatred. This was not just about money anymore. This was personal. Brittany was trying to erase the soul of this family. She wanted the prestige of the King name, but she despised the culture that built it. I loaded the records into the back of my car. As I drove away, I saw Brittany standing in the window of the master bedroom. She was holding a glass of wine, looking out at the rain, oblivious to the fact that her enemy was right outside her gate, saving what she was too ignorant to value. I drove back to my penthouse and cleaned every record by hand. I placed them on my shelf next to the photo of Grandpa. "Don't worry, Grandpa," I whispered, touching the spine of the album. "I have them. They are safe." The next morning, the final blow landed. My phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Big Mike, one of the senior truck drivers. He had known me since I was in diapers. "Zola, Mike," said his voice low and urgent. "You need to know what is happening down at the depot." "What is it, Mike?" I asked, sitting up in bed, instantly alert. "Did they fire more staff?" "Worse," Mike said. "Trey is here. He is with a group of guys in suits. They are not customers, Zola. They are liquidators." "Liquidators." I repeated, my blood running cold. Why would he need liquidators? "He is selling the fleet," Mike said. "He is selling 20 of the long-haul trucks. The core of the business. He says the maintenance costs are too high and the logistics model is outdated." Selling the trucks. I stood up, pacing the room. If he sells the trucks, there is no company. How does he plan to move freight? With magic? "He says he has a new investment strategy," Mike continued, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "He told us at the morning meeting. He says shipping is a dying industry. He is taking the cash from the sale of the trucks and putting it all into some new digital currency, crypto something. He says he is going to turn 10 million into 100 million overnight." I froze. He was selling the physical assets of a 50-year-old company to gamble on cryptocurrency. It was not just stupid, it was suicide. "He is going to wipe us out," Mike said, his voice cracking. "Zola, you have to do something. The men are scared. We have families. If those trucks go, our jobs go. Hold tight, Mike, I said, my voice turning into steel. Do not quit. Do not strike. Just let him sign the papers. Let him sell the trucks. But Zola, trust me, Mike. I need him to do this. I need him to commit the act. Once he sells those trucks, he has violated the fiduciary duty to the shareholders. That is the trigger. I hung up the phone. I walked to my window and looked out at the city. My reflection in the glass looked dangerous. Trey had just made his fatal mistake. He thought he was being a visionary. He thought he was modernizing the business. But what he was actually doing was handing me the keys to his execution. I called Marcus. Wake up, Marcus, I said. Prepare the legal team. Trey is liquidating the fleet to buy crypto. The debt-to-equity ratio is about to explode. I paused, watching the sun rise over the city that was about to witness a massacre. Get the car ready, I said. It is time to go hunting. The lioness is hungry. 2 days later, I drove the battered Ford Taurus back to the estate. I told myself I was going there to retrieve my winter coats and a few boxes of books I had left behind in the rush of the eviction. But deep down, I knew there was another reason. I wanted to see the decay with my own eyes. I wanted to confirm that the intelligence reports Marcus was feeding me were real. When I pulled up to the gate, the security guard hesitated before buzzing me in. He looked tired. His uniform was unkempt. Even the staff could feel the ship sinking. I parked the car and walked up the front steps. The landscaping crew clearly had been fired. The pristine lawn that Grandpa used to obsess over was already looking overgrown with weeds poking through the flower beds. A plastic wrapper from a fast food meal blew across the porch. The dignity of the King estate was vanishing one piece of trash at a time. I used my key to open the front door, praying the locks had not been changed yet. The moment I stepped inside, the silence hit me. It was not the peaceful silence of a library. It was the hollow silence of an empty shell. The grand foyer was stripped. The antique console table where we used to put our keys was gone. The large oil painting of great-grandfather Silas was missing, leaving a pale rectangular ghost on the wall. I walked into the living room and stopped cold. It looked like a showroom that was going out of business. The heavy velvet drapes were gone, replaced by cheap sheer curtains that looked like they came from a discount bin. The furniture was rearranged haphazardly. Well, look who crawled back. I turned to see Brittany descending the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was my mother's. She was holding a mimosa at 10 in the morning. I am here for my things, Brittany, I said, walking past her toward the hallway closet. You mean the things we haven't sold yet? She laughed, following me. You should hurry. I have an appraiser coming in an hour to look at the silver collection. We are pivoting to a minimalist aesthetic. You are pivoting to bankruptcy, I muttered, grabbing my coats from the closet. I walked into the kitchen and found my father sitting at the island. He was staring at a laptop, frowning, deep lines etched into his forehead. He looked older than he had a week ago. There were dark circles under his eyes, but the moment he saw me, his face hardened into that familiar mask of arrogance. What are you doing in my house, Zola? He growled, closing the laptop. I told you to get out. I am leaving, Dad, I said, throwing my coats over a chair. But before I go, you need to listen to me. Seriously. He scoffed, reaching for his coffee mug. I have nothing to hear from you, unless you brought that money transfer. I ignored the jab. I heard about the fleet. I know Trey is selling 20 of the long-haul trucks to liquidators today. My father's eyes narrowed. That is none of your business. Trey is modernizing assets. We are moving away from heavy machinery. Dad, listen to me closely, I said, leaning on the counter, my voice urgent. You cannot sell those trucks. It is a violation of the service-level agreement with our biggest client. The contract states we must maintain a minimum fleet size of 50 active vehicles to guarantee delivery times. If you sell 20 trucks, you breach that clause. So what? My father waved his hand dismissively. We will rent trucks if we need them. You don't understand, I pressed. The penalty for breach of contract is not just a fine, it allows the client to terminate the entire deal immediately. That contract is 60% of your revenue, Dad. If they walk, King Logistics is dead by Friday. My father stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He looked furious, not because I was wrong, but because I was right, and he knew it. He hated that I knew the details of the business better than his golden son. "Stop trying to sabotage your brother," he shouted. "You are just jealous. You are jealous because Trey has vision. He is investing in cryptocurrency. He is going to turn this company into a digital powerhouse while you are stuck in the past worrying about trucks and tires." Cryptocurrency. Brittany chimed in, leaning against the doorframe, swirling her drink. "It is the future, Zola. But I would not expect a data entry clerk to understand Web 3.0. Trey is a genius. He is going to make us billionaires. You are just bitter because you are poor." I looked at them. The delusion was complete. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, convinced they could fly. "He is not a genius, Brittany," I said, cold and sharp. "He is a gambler. And he is gambling with Grandpa Legacy. Dad, if you let him sign those sale papers today, you are signing your own death warrant. Please, call the lawyers, read the contract." My father's face turned a dark shade of purple. He grabbed the ceramic coffee mug from the table. "I said get out," he roared. He hurled the mug at me. It flew past my head, missing me by inches, and smashed against the wall behind me. Hot coffee splattered across my winter coats. Shards of ceramic rained down on the floor. I stood there frozen, not flinching. I looked at the broken pieces on the floor, then up at the man who had raised me. "Don't you ever come back here and try to teach me how to run my family?" My father spat, his chest heaving. "You are nothing. You are a ghost to me. Get out." I looked at him one last time. The fear I used to feel for him was gone. It was replaced by a profound, icy pity. "Goodbye, Dad," I said quietly. I picked up my coffee-stained coats. I did not look at Brittany, who was smirking behind her glass. I walked out of the kitchen, through the empty foyer, and out the front door. I got into my car and started the engine. As I drove down the driveway, I reached for my phone. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "Yes, Zola." "Let the client know," I said. "Send an anonymous tip to the logistics manager at our biggest client. Tell them King Logistics is liquidating their fleet and will not be able to meet the quota next week." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "That will kill the contract instantly." "They threw the first stone, Marcus," I said, looking at the coffee stain on my sleeve. "I am just bringing the avalanche. Do it." I hung up and drove away. The warning had been given. The warning had been ignored. Now there was nothing left to do but watch them fall. The crash happened on a Tuesday. I watched it unfold on the Bloomberg terminal in my office while sipping sparkling water. The cryptocurrency market, which my brother had bet the entire future of King Logistics on, took a nosedive. It was a bloodbath. Within 6 hours, the $10 million he had generated from selling the fleet had evaporated into the digital ether, leaving behind a deficit of $500,000. I could only imagine the scene inside the King estate. Trey must have been refreshing his screen, watching his genius investment turn into dust, while beads of cold sweat rolled down his neck. He had not just lost money. He had lost the operating capital for next month's payroll and fuel, but a gambler never knows when to fold. Instead of confessing to Dad, Trey did exactly what I predicted. He doubled down. My intelligence alerts pinged later that afternoon. A new lien had been recorded against the company's main warehouse in South Atlanta. Trey had gone to a hard money lender. These were not banks. These were sharks in suits who charged predatory interest rates and asked very few questions as long as there was collateral. Trey had mortgaged the physical heart of our distribution network to cover his digital losses. He was burning the furniture to keep the house warm. That night my phone rang. It was my mother. "Zola," she whispered, and I could hear the hum of the washing machine in the background. She was hiding in the laundry room, the only place in that big house where voices did not carry. "Mom, are you safe?" I asked, turning away from my monitors. He is pacing the hallways. Zola? She said, her voice trembling. Trey. He looks sick. He has been shouting at people on the phone for hours. And your father? He is oblivious. He keeps asking when the returns are coming in so he can buy a boat. Zola. What is happening? The walls are closing in, Mom, I said calmly. Trey lost the money, all of it, and now he has borrowed more against the warehouse. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. The warehouse. Grandpa built that with his own hands. If we lose that, we will lose it, Mom, I cut her off. But that is part of the plan. Listen to me very carefully. Do not intervene. Do not ask questions. If you see Trey taking documents out of the safe, turn a blind eye. Let him dig the hole so deep he can never climb out. But your father, Mom cried softly. If he finds out, he will find out when it is too late, I said. But Mom, I need you to do one thing for me. Go to the safe tonight while everyone is sleeping. Find your passport. And find Grandpa vintage Rolex, the one Dad wears on special occasions. Take them and hide them. Hide them why? Because when the federal investigators come, and they will come, they freeze everything. I explained, my voice devoid of emotion. They might consider Dad a flight risk if they think he is complicit in Trey fraud. You need to protect yourself. There was a long silence. I could feel her processing the reality that her son was now a criminal and her daughter was the architect of his downfall. Okay, she whispered. I will get them. Be careful, Zola. You are playing with fire. I am not playing, Mom, I said. I am the fire. 2 days later, the inevitable happened. The bank that held the original mortgage on the estate sent a notice of default. Trey had stopped paying the house payments to service the interest on his hard money loan. He intercepted the mail before Dad could see it. I saw the footage from the security camera at the front gate, which I still had remote access to. Trey snatched the envelope with the red stamp, tore it open, and shoved it into his pocket, looking around guiltily like a thief. He was desperate. He needed a massive injection of cash to keep the lights on and keep Dad from finding out the truth. And that was when I set the trap. Through a series of shell companies, I had established a private equity fund called Apex Capital. On the surface, it looked like an aggressive, high-risk lender based in New York. In reality, it was funded entirely by my personal assets. I had my team send a targeted marketing email to Trey corporate account offering rapid bridge loans for distressed logistics companies. It took him less than an hour to bite. Marcus walked into my office holding a tablet, his face pale. He submitted the application, Zola, Marcus said, placing the device on my desk. He is asking for $2 million. He says it is for fleet expansion. I looked at the digital application. It was pathetic. The financial projections were fabricated. But that was not what caught my eye. Scroll down to the signature page, I said. Marcus swiped up. To secure a loan of this size involving the company assets, the majority shareholder needed to sign. Reginald King needed to sign. I looked at the signature line. There it was. Reginald King written in a shaky, looping scrawl. I pulled a file from my drawer, a birthday card my father had sent me 3 years ago. I compared the signatures. They were close but not identical. The slant was wrong. The pressure points were different. Trey had forged Dad's signature. He had just committed felony fraud. He had crossed the line from incompetent businessman to criminal. Do we reject it? Marcus asked. He forged it. This is invalid. No, I said, leaning back in my chair, a dark satisfaction settling in my chest. We approve it, Zola, Marcus warned. If we approve this, we are lending $2 million to a fraudster. We will never see that money again. I am not lending him money, Marcus, I said, looking at the forged signature. I am buying his soul. Once the funds are transferred, I will own the debt, and I will hold the proof of the forgery. This document is not a loan agreement. It is a confession. Process the wire transfer, I ordered. Send it to the account he specified. But what if he runs with the money? He won't run, I said, standing up and walking to the window. He is arrogant. He thinks he can gamble his way out of this. He thinks he just found a lifeline. He has no idea he just grabbed onto an anchor. I watched the city of Atlanta bustling below me. Somewhere in that sprawl, my brother was probably sighing with relief, thinking he had outsmarted the system. He thought he was saving the empire. Send the money, Marcus, I repeated, and prepare the foreclosure notice. We strike on Monday. The downward spiral was complete. Now all that was left was the impact. While Trey was busy digging his grave with high-interest loans, Brittany was busy trying to turn the King estate into her own personal palace of Versailles. She decided that the best way to solidify her status as the new matriarch of the family was to host an exclusive garden tea party. She invited the wives of the local politicians, the daughters of oil tycoons, and the social climbers of Buckhead. These were women who smiled with their teeth and judged you by the thread count of your napkins. Brittany wanted to impress them. She wanted to show them that she had successfully gentrified the King legacy. I watched the preparations through the security cameras from my office. She had hired the most expensive catering company in Atlanta. There were towers of macarons, imported champagne, and ice sculptures that melted slowly in the Georgia heat. She was wearing a white dress that cost more than my first car, and she was laughing loudly, trying too hard to fit in with a crowd that would never truly accept her. But the performance was about to be interrupted by reality. Around 3 in the afternoon, the head caterer, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, approached Brittany. She was holding a mobile payment terminal. I zoomed in on the camera feed. I saw Brittany wave her hand dismissively and pull out the black American Express card. The company card. The card that was linked to the account Trey had just drained to pay the first installment of his predatory loan. Brittany tapped the card with a flourish. The machine beeped, a harsh dissonant sound. Declined. Brittany frowned. She laughed nervously, glancing at her friends who were pretending not to watch while sipping their tea. Try it again, she said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. It is probably the chip. It is a new card. Mrs. Gable tried again. Beep, declined. I watched Brittany's face turn from porcelain white to a blotchy red. The whispers started. I saw one of the socialites lean over to another and cover her mouth with a gloved hand. The humiliation was palpable. Do you have another form of payment? Mrs. Gable asked, her voice losing its professional warmth. The bill is $15,000, Mrs. King, and we require payment upon service. Brittany scrambled through her purse. She pulled out another card. Declined. And another. Declined. I had frozen them all. Every single line of credit attached to the estate was now locked down tight. I cannot believe this! Brittany shrieked, her composure cracking. It must be a bank error. My husband is the CEO of King Logistics. We have plenty of money. Just wait here. I need to make a call. She stormed away from the party, marching toward the house. My phone rang seconds later. I let it ring twice before answering. I put it on speaker and hit the record button. Zola, she screamed. What did you do? Hello, Brittany, I said, calm and unbothered. I am busy working. Is there a problem? You know damn well there is a problem, she hissed. My cards are not working. I have 50 guests in the garden and the caterer is threatening to leave. Fix it. Unfreeze the accounts right now. I leaned back in my chair, smiling at the ceiling. I cannot do that, Brittany. I do not work for the company anymore, remember. I am just a guest who was kicked out. I have no authority. Don't give me that garbage, she yelled, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. You did this. You and your petty little grudge. You are trying to embarrass me. You are embarrassing yourself, I said. You are throwing a party with money you do not have. Listen to me, you little witch. Brittany's voice dropped lower, turning venomous. I am the best thing that ever happened to this family. I am trying to elevate you people. I am trying to wash the stink of diesel and mediocrity off this estate. And you are ruining it, because you are jealous that a white woman is running your grandfather's house better than you ever could. There it was, The mask slipped. The racism that she usually hid behind passive-aggressive compliments came pouring out. "Elevate us," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral, baiting her. "Is that what you think you are doing?" "Yes," she snapped. "Your brother knows it. That is why he chose me. He wanted someone with class, someone with pedigree, not someone like you who belongs in the back office. Now turn the cards back on, or I will tell Trey to sell your precious grandfather's grave plot next." I felt a cold flash of anger, but I pushed it down. I had what I needed. "I cannot help you, Brittany," I said. "Maybe you should ask your parents for the money. They are wealthy, right?" "My parents," she scoffed. "My parents think I am a saint. They think I am suffering living with this family. They send me money to help me cope with your father backward ways. But that is my personal money. I am not spending it on this. This is a company expense. Now fix it." "I am hanging up now, Brittany," I said. "Good luck with the dishes." I ended the call. I saved the recording. It was perfect. In 2 minutes she had insulted the family heritage, admitted to using her parents' money to hide her greed, and revealed her deep-seated racism. I pulled up a contact on my computer. Mr. and Mrs. Pennington, Brittany parents. They were old money from Savannah. Conservative, religious, and obsessed with public image. They prided themselves on raising a daughter who was a Southern belle. They hated two things above all else: vulgarity and financial irresponsibility. I attached the audio file to an email. I wrote a short subject line: "A concern regarding your daughter's well-being." In the body of the email I wrote, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Pennington, I thought you should hear how Brittany speaks about her new family and how she is managing her finances. She seems to be under a lot of stress. Perhaps she needs your guidance. Sincerely, Zola King." I hit send. I turned back to the security monitor. Brittany was back in the garden trying to stall the caterer. She was laughing loudly, her voice shrill and brittle. 10 minutes passed. Then Brittany's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her face went pale. She answered it immediately, her voice turning into a sugary sweet whine. "Hi, Daddy. I am so glad you called. I was just—" She stopped. She listened. Her mouth fell open. "What?" she stammered. "No, Daddy, that is not. I never said. It was edited. Zola is lying, she is—" She went silent again. I could almost hear the shouting from the other end of the line. Mr. Pennington was not a man who tolerated being lied to. And he certainly did not tolerate his daughter sounding like common trash. "Daddy, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "You cannot cut me off. I have bills. I have—" The call ended. Brittany stood there holding the phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. She had just lost her safety net. Her personal allowance, the secret fund she used to buy her designer bags, was gone. Her parents had cut the cord. Mrs. Gable, the caterer, stepped forward, crossing her arms. "Mrs. King, if you cannot pay, we are going to have to pack up, and we will be taking the food with us. Also, we will be billing you for the wasted time." Brittany looked around. Her friends were staring. The silence was absolute. The facade had crumbled. "Take it," she whispered, defeated. "Just take it and go." I watched as the waiters began clearing the tables. They took the champagne. They took the macarons. They even took the flowers. The guests began to leave, muttering apologies and making excuses about needing to pick up their children. Within 20 minutes, Brittany was alone in the garden, standing amidst the empty tables. The white dress looked ridiculous now. She looked like a bride left at the altar. I took a sip of my water. "One down," I whispered. "Two to go." The notice of default hit the inbox of the CEO of King Logistics at 9 o'clock sharp on Monday morning. I sent it personally. It was a formal legal document stating that because the borrower had liquidated assets specifically pledged as collateral without the lender's consent, the entire principal amount of $2 million plus penalties was now due immediately. The clock was ticking. They had 48 hours to pay, or Apex Capital would seize the remaining assets. I watched the chaos unfold from my office. Trey was in the conference room at the depot. I saw him throw his phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and cracked. He was hyperventilating. He had spent the first tranche of the loan on crypto, which was gone, and on paying off his gambling debts. He didn't have $2 million. He didn't even have 200,000. He had no choice. He had to call Dad. I switched the audio feed to the main office line. I heard Trey's voice shaking. Dad, we have a problem, a small liquidity issue. A small liquidity issue, my father bellowed on the other end. The bank just called me saying our corporate credit cards are dead. What did you do, Trey? I took out a bridge loan, just to tide us over. But the terms, they are unfair, Dad. They are calling the loan early. They want $2 million by Wednesday. There was a silence on the line that was heavier than the grave. I imagined my father standing in his kitchen gripping the counter, his knuckles white. The son he had bet everything on had just mortgaged the empire behind his back. $2 million, my father whispered. You borrowed $2 million. Where is the money, Trey? Trey started stammering, lying about market volatility and unexpected expenses. But my father wasn't listening. He was realizing that his legacy was hanging by a thread. Get to the house, my father ordered. Now. I drove to a coffee shop across the street from the estate. I didn't go in. I just sat there sipping a black coffee, watching through the window of my car. I saw Trey's sports car screech into the driveway. I saw him run inside. Inside the library, the shouting match was legendary. I didn't need a bug to hear it. I could see them through the window, pacing, waving their arms. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She was probably hiding in her room, clutching her passport, just like I told her. But desperation makes people do dangerous things. Instead of admitting defeat, instead of calling a lawyer or filing for bankruptcy, my father and brother decided to commit one final fatal error. They decided to scam their way out. I received an alert an hour later. An email blast went out from King Logistics to every high-net-worth individual in Atlanta, every partner, every supplier, and every friend of the family. The subject line read, "An exclusive invitation, the future of logistics." They were hosting a gala, a fundraising gala. I read the prospectus attached to the email. It was a work of fiction. They were selling 20% of the company in the form of Class B expansion shares. They promised a guaranteed return of 15% within 6 months based on proprietary new contracts that did not exist. They were selling shares in a sinking ship. And worse, they were selling shares that they didn't technically have the right to sell because the company was already insolvent and the assets were encumbered by my liens. It was securities fraud, plain and simple. I leaned back in my car seat. They were walking right into the line of fire. They needed fast cash from gullible investors to pay off Apex Capital before the deadline. They were literally robbing Peter to pay Paul. But they didn't know that Paul was me. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Zola, did you see the email?" he asked. "They are selling equity. This is illegal. They haven't disclosed the debt or the liens." I know, I said, watching the lights go on in the ballroom of the mansion. "They are desperate, Marcus. They think they can charm their way out of this. They think if they get enough rich people in a room and pour enough champagne, they can sell them a dream." "We have to stop them," Marcus said. "People will lose millions." "We won't let them lose a dime," I said. "We let them host the gala. We let them make the pitch. We let them stand on that stage and lie to everyone. And then we shut it down." "But Zola—" "Get me a ticket, Marcus. A ticket." "You are not on the guest list." "I am not going as a guest," I said, starting my car. "I am going as the owner. Buy a table, use a shell company, put it under the name Nemesis Holdings. I want a front row seat when the house of cards falls." I drove away, leaving my father and brother to plan their grand deception. They had 48 hours. They would spend it hiring caterers, renting a stage, and printing glossy brochures full of lies. They thought this gala was their salvation. They didn't realize it was actually their sentencing hearing. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the curtain to rise. The morning of the gala arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The humidity in Atlanta was oppressive, hanging over the city like a wet blanket, but inside my penthouse the air was cool and still. I stood in front of my walk-in closet staring at the rows of clothes. For years I had dressed to be invisible. I wore beige cardigans and sensible gray slacks, blending into the background of the King estate like a piece of furniture. I had dimmed my own light so my brother could shine. But today the dimmer switch was being ripped out of the wall. I reached past the black and navy suits, the standard uniform of the corporate world, and pulled out the garment bag I had purchased in Milan 3 years ago and never worn. I unzipped it slowly. The fabric spilled out like liquid fire. It was a vintage Armani power suit in a shade of crimson so deep it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was tailored to within an inch of its life. Sharp shoulders, a cinched waist, trousers that fell in a perfect straight line. I put it on. The silk lining felt cool against my skin. I buttoned the jacket and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was not Zola the data entry clerk. She was not even Zola the sister. She was the executioner. I applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Sharp winged eyeliner, high cheekbones highlighted to catch the stage lights, and finally a matte red lipstick that matched the suit perfectly. I did not wear jewelry, no pearls, no diamonds. The only accessory I needed was the truth. I walked into the living room where my team was waiting. My penthouse had been transformed into a war room. The large mahogany dining table was covered in files, laptops, and coffee cups. Marcus was there looking anxious but determined. 2 senior partners from my legal firm sat on one side. On the other side sat Detective Miller and his partner from the Atlanta Economic Crimes Unit. The room went silent as I entered. I saw Detective Miller's eyes widen slightly. They knew I meant business. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, my voice steady. "Are we ready?" Detective Miller stood up. He was a gruff man who had seen too many white-collar criminals get away with a slap on the wrist. He picked up the file in front of him. "We have reviewed the evidence you submitted, Ms. King," he said. "The forensic accountant has confirmed the trail. The funds from the bridge loan provided by Apex Capital were transferred almost immediately to 3 separate offshore accounts linked to known gambling syndicates. And the signature I asked walking to the head of the table. The lab confirmed it," the detective nodded. "The signature on the loan documents is a forgery. It attempts to mimic Reginald King handwriting, but the pressure points and the slant are inconsistent. It is a clumsy attempt. Your brother Trey King committed felony bank fraud and identity theft the moment he signed that paper." I looked at the document lying on the table, the paper that would send my brother to prison. It looked so innocent, just ink on wood pulp. But it was a cage. "We also have the wire fraud charges," one of my lawyers added. "Soliciting investment funds for a company that is technically insolvent without disclosing the liabilities. That prospectus they sent out for the gala tonight. It is a confession of intent to defraud investors. So you have enough to move?" I asked, looking at the detective. "We have enough for an arrest warrant right now," Miller said. "We could pick him up at the house." "No," I said, sharp and quick. "Not at the house." Miller frowned. "Why not? It would be cleaner." "Because if you arrest him at the house, my father will try to cover it up," I explained. "He will pay bail. He will hire spin doctors. He will say it was a misunderstanding. The investors will never know the truth. They will still pour money into that black hole." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. The red of my sleeves reflected in the polished wood. "You take him at the gala," I said. "You take him when he is on stage. When he is holding the microphone lying to the faces of the people he is trying to rob. I want everyone to see it. I want the reputation of the King family to be scorched earth so that nobody, not even my father, can pretend this didn't happen. Detective Miller looked at me for a long moment. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes. He saw that this wasn't just about justice. It was about purification. Verify the warrant, he told his partner. We will have units on standby at the hotel. We wait for your signal, Ms. King. Thank you, I said. The meeting broke up. The police left to position themselves. The lawyers began packing their briefcases to head to the venue. Marcus stayed behind, packing the final documents into a metal briefcase. I will meet you in the car, Marcus, I said. Give me a minute. He nodded and left the room. I was alone. The silence returned. I walked over to the mantel above the fireplace. There, sitting in a simple silver frame, was the photo of Grandpa Otis. It was taken the day he bought his first fleet of 10 trucks. He was wearing dusty overalls, standing in front of a grill, wiping grease from his hands. He was grinning a smile full of hope and grit. He looked like a man who knew he was building something that would outlast him. I picked up the frame. The glass was cold. I ran my thumb over his face. I am sorry, Grandpa. I whispered, my voice trembling for the first time that day. I know you wanted me to protect them. I know you wanted the family to stay together. I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to ruin my makeup. But I cannot save the house without killing the termites, I said to the photo. Dad let the rot set in. And Trey? Trey is the disease. If I let them continue, there will be nothing left of what you built. No trucks, no legacy, just a shameful headline in the newspaper. I looked at his eyes in the photo. They seemed to be challenging me, asking me if I had the strength to do what needed to be done. I have to break it, Grandpa, I said, my voice hardening. I have to smash it into a million pieces. It is the only way to get the keys back. It is the only way to build it back right. With honor, with hard work. The way you did it. I kissed the glass softly and placed the photo back on the mantel. Watch me, I whispered. I turned around. My reflection caught in the mirror again. The red suit blazed like a warning fire. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I didn't look like a daughter. I grabbed my clutch. I walked to the door. I turned off the lights, leaving the penthouse in darkness. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into the arena. Marcus was waiting in the back of the black SUV. He held the door open for me. To the gala, he asked. I put on my sunglasses, hiding my eyes. To the slaughter, I said. The car pulled out into the Atlanta traffic, moving toward the glimmering lights of the downtown hotel. The sun had set. The night had begun. And the red wedding was about to start. The St. Regis Atlanta ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, a monument to old money and Southern excess. My father and brother had spared no expense in setting the stage for their grand deception. They had rented the largest hall, ordered thousands of dollars worth of imported orchids, and hired a 12-piece jazz band that played softly in the background, masking the scent of desperation that hung over the King family. From the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of the velvet curtains, I watched the performance begin. It was theatrical, it was impressive, and it was completely fraudulent. My father, Reginald King, was working the room like a politician. He was wearing a tuxedo that strained slightly at the buttons, a glass of scotch in one hand, and a fake smile plastered on his face. He moved from table to table, clasping the shoulders of investors, promising them that the liquidity issues were just rumors and that the King Empire was stronger than ever. I saw him talking to Mr. Abernathy, the banker, who looked skeptical. My father laughed loudly, too loudly, slapping Mr. Abernathy on the back. Trust me, Jim, my father boomed, his voice carrying over the music. This new digital direction Trey has mapped out. It is revolutionary. We are not just moving boxes anymore. We are moving data. I checked my phone. The warrant had been signed. The police were in the lobby, but I needed them to wait. The trap had to snap shut when the bait was fully swallowed. Center stage, my brother Trey was holding court. He looked manic. His eyes were wide and bright, likely fueled by something stronger than adrenaline. He was pointing at a large projection screen displaying a graph that showed a hockey stick growth curve. It was a complete fabrication. The numbers were made up. The projected revenue was based on contracts that did not exist. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trey announced into his headset microphone, his voice slick with charisma. "What you are looking at is the future. King Logistics 2.0. We are leveraging blockchain technology to revolutionize freight." He was using buzzwords he didn't understand to sell shares he didn't have the right to sell. And then there was Brittany. My sister-in-law was holding court near the Champagne Tower. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, and around her neck was a massive diamond necklace. She was touching it constantly, making sure everyone noticed. "It is a family heirloom," she was telling a group of envious socialites. "From the vault. Grandmother King wore it to her wedding. Reggie insisted I wear it tonight. He said it suits the new matriarch of the family." I suppressed a cold smile. Brittany didn't know the truth. She didn't know that the real necklace had been sold by my father 10 years ago to cover a bad investment. The piece around her neck was high-quality paste, a replica made for insurance purposes. She was parading around in glass, thinking she was dripping in diamonds. It was the perfect metaphor for her entire life. I signaled Marcus, who was standing by the entrance. "It is time," I whispered into my earpiece. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked to the main double doors of the ballroom. They were closed. Two large security guards, hired specifically by Trey to keep the riffraff out, stood with their arms crossed. I did not stop. I did not slow down. "Open them," I said. The guard on the left looked me up and down. He saw a woman in a red suit. He did not see an invitation. "Private event, ma'am," he grunted. "Guest list only. And I don't see your name." I didn't flinch. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single black card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a pass key. A master key. "I think you are confused," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I am not a guest." Before the guard could react, a man in a pristine tuxedo hurried over. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager of the St. Regis. He looked terrified. He had received the call from my holding company 10 minutes ago informing him that the venue was actually owned by a subsidiary of ZO Holdings. "Step aside," Mr. Sterling hissed at the guards, his face pale. The guards looked confused, but they saw the fear in their boss's eyes. They stepped back. Mr. Sterling bowed his head slightly. "Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. We were not expecting you. Is everything to your satisfaction?" "It is about to be," I said. "Open the doors. Wide." Mr. Sterling signaled the staff. The heavy mahogany doors swung open simultaneously. At that exact moment, the lighting technician, who was also on my payroll, hit the cue. The ambient lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a single bright spotlight cut through the darkness. It was supposed to hit the stage where Trey was standing. Instead, it swung around and hit the doorway. It hit me. The red Armani suit blazed under the light. I stood there framed by the doorway like an avenging angel. The chatter in the room stopped instantly. The jazz band faltered and died out. All heads turned. For a heartbeat there was total silence, the kind of silence where you can hear a pin drop. I began to walk. Click, click, click. The sound of my heels on the marble floor echoed through the cavernous room. I walked straight down the center aisle. The crowd parted instinctively. These were powerful people, titans of industry, but they sensed a predator. They saw the way I walked, not with the frantic energy of my brother, but with the calm, terrifying assurance of someone who holds the deed to the building. I saw my father freeze mid-sip. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, but nobody looked at him. They were looking at me. Brittany dropped her hand from her fake necklace, her mouth falling open in horror. I kept walking. My eyes were locked on the stage, locked on Trey. He was standing there, blinded by the stage lights, trying to see who had interrupted his moment of glory. He squinted, shielding his eyes. When he finally focused, when he finally recognized the woman in the red suit walking toward him, his face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated rage. He gripped the microphone so hard his knuckles turned white. He had spent his whole life trying to outshine me, trying to bury me, and here I was walking into his coronation wearing the color of war. He forgot the investors. He forgot the fraud. He forgot the script. Who let her in? He screamed into the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers, causing a screech of feedback that made the guests wince. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. I crossed my arms and looked up at him. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My presence was the statement. Security Trey yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Get her out of here! Who allowed this employee to enter? This is a private event." He looked around wildly, seeking the guards. "Bouncer, grab her. Drag this low-level clerk out of my hotel. She is trespassing. Get her out now." The guests gasped. They looked from the screaming man on stage to the composed, powerful woman standing in the aisle. They were confused. They had been told I was a nobody, a secretary. But secretaries don't wear $5,000 suits and shut down ballrooms with a look. The security guards started to move toward me, hesitant, but obeying the man who signed their checks. But before they could touch me, I raised one hand, just one. And from the back of the room, a booming voice cut through Trey's hysteria. "Nobody touch her. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Marcus. It was Detective Miller walking through the doors I had just opened, flanked by 4 uniformed officers." Trey froze. The microphone dropped from his hand, hitting the stage with a dull thud. The red wedding had begun. The silence in the ballroom was absolute suffocating and heavy like the air before a tornado touches down. Detective Miller and his officers stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, a silent wall of blue authority that kept the security guards frozen in place. On stage, my brother Trey looked like a man waking up from a nightmare only to realize he was still falling. He gripped the microphone stand with sweaty hands, his eyes darting from the police to me, unable to comprehend how the power dynamic had shifted so violently in the span of 30 seconds. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I did not rush. I moved with the deliberate, terrifying grace of a woman who had spent years being told to sit down and shut up and was now finally standing tall. The click of my heels on the wooden stage floor echoed through the sound system, a steady rhythm of approaching judgment. I stopped right next to Trey. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. He opened his mouth to speak, to shout, to assert the authority he thought he possessed, but nothing came out. He was paralyzed by the sheer audacity of my presence. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He didn't fight me. He let go as if the metal was burning his skin. I turned to face the crowd. The blinding stage lights washed over me, but I didn't squint. I looked out at the sea of faces, the investors, the partners, the socialites who had come to witness the rise of the king heir, and instead were witnessing his execution. "Please excuse the interruption," I said, my voice calm and amplified, filling every corner of the room. "I know you were all promised a presentation on the future of King Logistics, and you are going to get one. But it is not the fairy tale my brother was selling you. It is the balance sheet." I looked up at the control booth where Marcus was waiting. "Now, Marcus," I said. The massive projection screen behind me flickered. The slide showing the fake hockey stick growth curve vanished. In its place, a complex web of financial data appeared. It was a forensic map of the company's debt. Red lines crisscrossed the screen, connecting King Logistics to various offshore accounts and high-interest loans. A gasp rippled through the audience. Men in expensive suits put on their glasses, leaning forward. They recognized debt when they saw it. "What you are looking at is the reality of King Logistics," I explained, pointing at the screen. "The company is not expanding. It is hemorrhaging. The fleet has been liquidated. The warehouse is leveraged to the hilt. And those Class B shares you are about to buy, they are worthless. They are tickets on the Titanic after it has already hit the iceberg." "Liar," Trey screamed, finding his voice at last. He lunged toward me but stopped short when he saw Detective Miller take a step forward. "She is lying. She is just a disgruntled employee. I am the CEO. I own this company. This. Turn that screen off." I turned to look at him slowly. You don't own anything, Trey. I said, my voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. You don't own the trucks. You don't own the warehouse. You don't even own the chair you sit in. Because you borrowed against it all. I pointed to a specific line on the screen. It highlighted a loan for $2 million provided by Apex Capital. You signed a bridge loan with Apex Capital 48 hours ago, I said. A loan with strict covenants regarding asset liquidation. You violated those covenants the moment you sold the fleet, which means the loan is in default, and the lender has the right to accelerate the debt and seize control. So what? Trey spat, wiping spit from his chin. So Apex Capital owns the debt. I will talk to them. I will renegotiate. Who are they anyway? Some bank in New York? I will charm them. I couldn't help it. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Apex Capital isn't a bank in New York, Trey. Apex Capital is a subsidiary, a shell company designed to hold distressed assets. A subsidiary of what he asked, blinking rapidly. I gestured to the screen again. The graphic changed. The logo of Apex Capital dissolved and was replaced by the logo of its parent company, a stylized golden lion, and underneath it the name, Lioness LLC. The room went deadly quiet. And Lioness LLC. I continued, turning back to the audience, my voice ringing out like a bell, is a private equity firm that specializes in hostile takeovers and corporate restructuring. It holds 51% of the preferred stock in King Logistics. It holds the mortgage on the estate. And as of this morning, it holds the default notice on your bridge loan. My father, Reginald King, came running down the aisle. He scrambled up the stairs onto the stage, his face a mask of confusion and fury. "What is this nonsense, Zola?" he shouted, ignoring the audience. "What is Lioness LLC? Who is behind this? Is this some competitor trying to squeeze us out? I will sue them. I will bury them." I looked at my father, the man who had looked at me with such disdain for 32 years, the man who had told me my only value was in my husband. "You can't sue them, Dad," I said, soft enough that only the microphone picked it up, making it sound intimate and terrifying. "Because you can't sue yourself. Or rather, you can't sue the family." I looked up at the screen one last time. A final document appeared. It was the option agreement, the one my mother had handed me in the rain. And zoomed in at the bottom, next to Grandpa Otis's signature, was the signature of the managing member of Lioness LLC. My father turned and looked at the screen. He squinted, reading the name. Zola King. He read it again and again. He turned back to me, his eyes wide, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You," he whispered. "You are Lioness." "Yes, Dad," I said. "Grandpa knew you would run this company into the ground. He knew Trey was weak. So 5 years ago, he built a failsafe. He built a shadow company, and he put me in charge of it. He gave me the power to step in when you failed, and you have failed spectacularly." "No." My father stammered, backing away from me as if I were a ghost. "This is impossible. You are just a girl. You answer phones. You drive a Taurus." "I played the part you wanted me to play," I said, stepping closer to him, causing him to shrink back. "You wanted a servant, so I served. You wanted a quiet daughter, so I was silent. But while you were busy playing king in your little castle, I was building an empire. I wasn't typing data, Dad. I was managing portfolios for billionaires. I was learning how to eat sharks like you for breakfast." I turned back to Trey, who was now shaking uncontrollably. "And you," I said, addressing him. "You forged Dad's signature on that loan document. You defrauded these investors. And you violated the bylaws of the company." I pulled a folded document from the inside pocket of my red suit. I snapped it open. "This is a resolution from the majority shareholder of Lioness LLC." I announced, my voice booming. "Pursuant to the default clauses in the loan agreement and the voting rights attached to my preferred stock, I am hereby removing Trey King from the position of CEO effective immediately." I am also removing Reginald King from the board of directors for gross negligence." "You can't do that?" Trey shrieked, tears streaming down his face. "This is my company. Dad, tell her she can't do that." My father didn't say a word. He was staring at the floor, broken by the weight of his own underestimation. "I just did," I said coldly. "You are fired, Trey, both of you. Get off my stage." Trey looked at the crowd, looking for sympathy, but he found none. The investors looked angry. They looked like they wanted blood. They realized that the woman in the red suit had just saved them from being scammed. "Security," I called out. The guards who had been ready to drag me out stepped forward, looking at me for instructions. They knew who the boss was now. "Escort these gentlemen out of the building," I said, pointing at my father and brother. "They are trespassing at a Lioness LLC corporate event." Trey tried to lunge at me one last time, a desperate flailing attempt to regain control. "You witch! I will kill you!" But Detective Miller was faster. He stepped onto the stage, his hand resting on his handcuffs. "I wouldn't do that," son Miller said, his voice gravelly. "You are already in enough trouble." Trey collapsed. He fell to his knees, sobbing in front of the projection of my signature. It was pathetic. It was the end of the line. My father looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a profound shock. "Zola," he whispered. "Why?" "Because you forgot one thing, Dad," I said, leaning in close so only he could hear. "You forgot that lions don't just protect the pride, the lionesses do the hunting." I stood up straight and signaled the guards, "Take them away." As the security guards dragged my screaming brother and my shell-shocked father off the stage, the room erupted. Not in chaos, but in applause. The investors began to clap, then the partners, then the staff, a thunderous ovation for the new queen. I stood alone on the stage, bathed in the spotlight, the red suit glowing like victory. I didn't smile, I didn't bow, I just watched them go, knowing that the corporate execution was finished. But the criminal one was just beginning. The chaos on the stage was just beginning to settle when my brother decided to make one final desperate attempt to regain control of a narrative that had already spiraled rapidly out of his hands. As Detective Miller moved to handcuff him, Trey let out a guttural roar, a sound that was less like a man and more like a cornered animal. With a surge of hysterical strength, he wrenched his arm free from the officer's grip. He did not run toward the exit. He did not run toward his wife. He turned his wild, bloodshot eyes directly on me. "You did this!" he screamed, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You jealous little witch, you planted this! You faked it all!" He lunged. For a split second, the room gasped as Trey sprinted across the wooden stage toward me, his hands curled into claws ready to tear the red suit from my body, ready to erase the sister who had dared to outsmart him. I did not move. I did not flinch. I did not even blink. I stood perfectly still, my heels planted firmly on the floor, watching him come. He never reached me. 2 feet away from where I stood, a shadow moved. It was the head of my private security detail, a man named Isaac, who was twice Trey's size and infinitely more disciplined. Isaac stepped in front of me, moving with the speed of a striking cobra. He didn't strike Trey. He simply absorbed him. He caught my brother mid-lunge, grabbing him by the lapels of his expensive tuxedo and slamming him backward. Trey hit the floor hard. The wind knocked out of him. He scrambled backward, crab-walking away from Isaac, looking up at me with terror, finally realizing that he could not bully his way out of this situation. I looked down at him, my expression unchanged. "Violence is the last resort of the incompetent Trey," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone cutting through his heavy breathing. "You really should have read the contract more carefully. Section 4 specifically covers conduct detrimental to the company image. Attempted assault on the majority shareholder is definitely a breach." I looked up at the control booth and nodded at Marcus. "Show them where the money went, Marcus." The screen behind me shifted again. Gone were the complex webs of corporate structure. In their place appeared a series of high-resolution bank statements. They were magnified so that even the people in the back row could read the fine print. You told these investors that you needed capital for fleet expansion, I said, walking slowly around my fallen brother, like a prosecutor in a courtroom. You told Dad you needed money for fuel and maintenance. But the forensic audit tells a different story. I pointed to the first highlighted column. Here we see a transfer of $50,000 on the 12th of last month, I said. The recipient is listed as Shell Corporation in the Cayman Islands. But we traced the IP address of the beneficiary. It belongs to an online gaming syndicate called Royal Flush International. A murmur of disgust rippled through the ballroom. These investors worked hard for their money. Seeing it thrown away on a roulette wheel was a personal insult. And here I continued, pointing to another line. $75,000, 2 days later, just after you laid off 5 senior drivers claiming budget cuts. That money didn't go to Diesel Trey. It went to cover a marker you owed to a bookie in Las Vegas. Trey curled into a ball on the floor, putting his hands over his ears as if he could block out the truth. But I wasn't done. I turned my attention to the side of the stage where Brittany was standing. She had been trying to inch away toward the exit, hoping to slip out unnoticed, hoping to play the role of the innocent victimized wife. She froze when my gaze landed on her. And then, there is the matter of overhead costs, I said, my voice turning icy. You see, embezzlement is rarely a solo act. It requires an ecosystem. And while Trey was gambling away the operating capital, someone else was busy spending the reserve funds. Brittany's eyes went wide. She shook her head rapidly, mouthing the word no. Marcus, next slide, please. The screen changed. This time it showed credit card statements. The American Express black card that Brittany loved to flash around town. $3,000 at Chanel, I read aloud. $5,000 at Hermes. $12,000 for a spa retreat in Sedona. All charged to the corporate expense account under the code Office Supplies. I looked at the crowd. I didn't know King Logistics needed Birkin bags to deliver freight, I said dryly. Did any of you know that? The socialites who had been drinking Brittany champagne 10 minutes ago were now looking at her with open disdain. They realized that the luxury she had been flaunting in their faces was stolen. Brittany stepped forward, her voice shrill and desperate. I didn't know, Zola, I swear. Trey gave me the card. He told me it was his bonus. He told me we were rich. I am a victim here too. He lied to me, just like he lied to everyone else. She pointed an accusatory finger at her husband, who was still on the floor. He is the criminal, she screamed. I am just a mother trying to provide a lifestyle for our family. I had no idea the money was stolen. I am innocent. I watched her throw him under the bus without a second of hesitation. It was exactly what I expected. Innocent, I repeated, tilting my head. That is an interesting word choice, Brittany. Because when I had my team dig into the expenses, I found something that didn't fit the pattern. I signaled Marcus. The screen changed one last time, but this time it wasn't numbers. It was photos. High-resolution surveillance photos taken by a private investigator over the last 3 months. The first photo showed Brittany sitting at an intimate table in a bistro holding hands with a man who was definitely not Trey. The man was young, fit, and wearing a tennis outfit. The second photo showed them entering a luxury hotel in downtown Atlanta. The third photo showed the hotel bill. The room went dead silent. The shock was palpable. You claim you spent the money on the family, Brittany, I said, my voice devoid of mercy. But according to these receipts, King Logistics paid $4,000 last month for a suite at the Four Seasons. The guest listed is not Trey King. It is a Mr. Julian Vance, your personal tennis instructor. Trey, who had been sobbing into his hands, stopped. He slowly lifted his head. He looked at the screen. He saw the photos. He saw his wife, the woman he had stolen, for the woman he had destroyed his relationship with me, for smiling at another man. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. Brittany stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. It was just lessons. Private lessons. That is not what it looks like. It looks like you were charging the company for your affairs, I said. You didn't just spend stolen money, Brittany. You used the money your husband stole to pay for the hotel room where you cheated on him. Trey stood up. He didn't look at me anymore. He didn't look at the police. He looked at Brittany. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute. He had sacrificed his integrity, his father respect, and his sister love to give this woman the world. And she had used his money to laugh at him behind his back. You, Trey whispered, his voice cracking. You told me you were at charity meetings. You told me you loved me. Brittany's face twisted. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the ugliness underneath. Oh, grow up, Trey, she spat, realizing there was no way out. You are a loser. Look at you. You are crying on the floor while your sister takes everything. Of course I found someone else. You couldn't even satisfy me, let alone run a company. I only stayed because I thought you had money. But clearly you are just a fraud. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Trey let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He looked at me. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He realized too late who was actually on his side and who was a parasite. Detective Miller stepped forward. All right, show is over, he said, gripping Trey's arm firmly. Trey King, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. Mrs. King, you are coming too. We have questions about those credit card charges. Being an accessory to fraud is still a felony. Brittany started screaming as a female officer grabbed her arm. My parents will sue you. Do you know who my father is? Get your hands off me. They dragged them both off the stage. My father, Reginald King, watched them go. He was sitting on the edge of the stage, looking old and defeated. He had lost his son. He had lost his daughter-in-law. And he had lost his company. He looked up at me. Zola, he rasped. You destroyed us. No, Dad, I said, looking down at him, my red suit gleaming under the lights. I didn't destroy anything. I just turned on the lights. The roaches did the rest to themselves. I turned back to the microphone one last time, addressing the stunned audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the drama tonight. But at King Logistics, we believe in transparency. The previous management has been removed. The debt is being restructured, and as of tomorrow morning, operations will resume under new ownership. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. My name is Zola King, and I promise you this company will never lie to you again. Enjoy the champagne. It is paid for. I placed the microphone on the stand. I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the wreckage of my family behind me. I walked straight toward the exit where Marcus was holding the door open. I didn't look back. There was nothing back there for me anymore. I had walked in as a ghost. I was walking out as the queen. The metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around my brother's wrists was a sound that seemed to cut through the heavy atmosphere of the ballroom like a guillotine blade. It was a cold, final sound. The sound of consequences finally catching up to a lifetime of entitlement. Trey was no longer the arrogant CEO standing on a stage preaching about the future. He was just a man in a rumpled tuxedo, his hands bound behind his back, his face wet with tears and sweat. Detective Miller did not handle him with kid gloves. He spun Trey around and began to recite his rights, the words flowing with a practiced rhythmic cadence that everyone in the room recognized from television procedurals. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Trey was not remaining silent. He was babbling a stream of incoherent pleas. Daddy, help me, he sobbed, looking desperately toward the edge of the stage where our father was sitting. Daddy, tell them who we are. Tell them they cannot arrest me. I am a king. I am the CEO. My father, Reginald King, tried to stand up. He gripped the edge of the velvet stage, skirting his knuckles, turning white. For a moment I saw the old fire in his eyes, the instinct to protect his golden child, to use his influence to make the problem go away. He opened his mouth to shout, to demand the officers release his son. But the shout never came. Instead, a gasp escaped his lips. A strangled, wet sound that made the people nearest to him step back in alarm. My father hand flew to his chest, clutching the lapel of his jacket. His face, which had been flushed with anger seconds ago, drained of all color, turning a terrifying shade of gray. His eyes bulged. He swayed on his feet for a precarious second, like a great oak tree that had been hollowed out from the inside and was finally surrendering to gravity. Reggie, a woman in the front row, screamed. My father collapsed. He did not fall gracefully. He crumpled, hitting the carpeted floor with a heavy thud that vibrated through the silent room. Dad, Trey screamed, struggling against the detective grip. Dad, get up. Chaos erupted in the front rows. People were shouting for a doctor. Guests were scrambling to get out of the way. I stood on the stage looking down at the scene. From my vantage point, I could see everything clearly. I saw the way my father's legs twitched. I saw the way his breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. I did not run to him. Years ago, when I was 7, I had fallen off my bicycle and scraped my knee down to the bone. I had run to my father, crying, bleeding, looking for comfort. He had looked at me with cold indifference and told me to stop crying, because kings do not cry over spilled blood. He had told me to toughen up. So I stood there, and I toughened up. Call the paramedics, I said to Marcus calmly. My voice was steady, devoid of the panic that was infecting everyone else. They are already on their way, Zola, Marcus replied, speaking into his headset. We had a medical team on standby in the lobby, just in case. Within seconds, the double doors burst open again, and a team of EMTs in bright yellow uniforms rushed in, pushing a gurney. They cut through the crowd, parting the sea of stunned investors. While the medics worked on my father, ripping open his shirt to attach monitor leads, my sister-in-law decided it was her moment to exit. Brittany had been watching the scene with wide, terrified eyes. She saw her husband in handcuffs. She saw her father-in-law on the floor, possibly dying. And her instinct was not to comfort either of them. Her instinct was self-preservation. She began to back away slowly toward the emergency exit on the east side of the ballroom. She kept her head down, trying to make herself small, trying to blend into the crowd of confused guests. She clutched her purse tightly to her chest, the purse that likely contained the corporate credit cards she had abused for years. I watched her go. I raised my hand and pointed a single finger. Officer, I said, my voice amplified by the microphone. The woman in the silver dress. She is attempting to flee the scene. Brittany froze. A uniformed female officer who had been standing near the exit stepped in front of her, blocking the path. Excuse me, Brittany stammered, her voice pitching up into a feigned innocent panic. I just need to get some air. My father-in-law just collapsed. I am going to call my doctor. I am breathless. Please let me pass. I am afraid I cannot do that, the officer said firmly. You are named in the warrant. What warrant? Brittany shrieked, dropping the facade. I didn't do anything. I am just a wife. I don't know anything about business. My husband did all of this. Arrest him. Detective Miller handed Trey off to another officer and walked over to Brittany. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Brittany King, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aiding and abetting, and grand larceny, he said. Larceny, she spat. That is ridiculous. I never stole anything. We have your signature on 20 separate credit card authorizations for expenses that were clearly personal, Miller said, his voice bored. And we have emails from your personal account directing the accountant to recategorize your spa trips as business development. You were not just spending the money, Mrs. King. You were actively helping to hide the theft. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. No, Brittany screamed as the officer grabbed her wrist. You cannot touch me. My father is a senator donor. This is assault. Zola, tell them. Tell them I am just a housewife. I looked at her from the stage. You are not a housewife, Brittany, I said into the microphone, ensuring the entire room heard the verdict. You are an accomplice, and you look terrible in silver. The click of the handcuffs on Brittany's wrists was the second movement in the symphony of my revenge. She began to wail, a high-pitched sound of pure entitlement being crushed by reality. They dragged her out, kicking and screaming, her heels dragging on the marble floor, the fake diamond necklace bouncing against her collarbone. I turned my attention back to the floor where the paramedics were lifting my father onto the gurney. He was conscious, but barely. An oxygen mask was strapped over his face. His eyes were darting around wildly, full of fear. One of the paramedics, a young man with a serious face, looked up at the stage. "Is there any family here?" he shouted. "We need to transport him to Grady Memorial immediately. We need someone to authorize the transport and provide medical history." Trey was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser outside. Brittany was in another. That left me. I walked down the stairs from the stage. The crowd parted for me, giving me a wide berth. I walked up to the gurney. My father looked up at me. His eyes above the plastic mask were pleading. He reached out a trembling hand toward me. His fingers brushed the fabric of my red suit. He was asking for forgiveness. He was asking for his daughter. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at the paramedic. "I am his daughter." I said, my voice cool and professional, like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "His name is Reginald King. He is 60 years old. He has a history of hypertension and high cholesterol. He is on beta blockers, but he often forgets to take them because he believes he is invincible." The paramedic nodded, scribbling on his clipboard. "Are you coming with us, Mom?" My father's hand squeezed my pant leg weakly. He wanted me to come. He wanted me to hold his hand and tell him it would be all right. He wanted the comfort he had denied me for 32 years. I reached down and gently but firmly removed his hand from my suit. I smoothed the fabric where he had touched it. "No," I said. "I have a company to run." My father's eyes widened in shock. A tear leaked out and ran down into his oxygen mask. I took the clipboard from the paramedic. I signed my name at the bottom of the release form. Zola King. The signature was sharp, angular, and strong. "Take good care of him," I said, handing the clipboard back. "Send the bill to his personal estate. The company insurance no longer covers him as of 10 minutes ago." I stepped back. "Load him up," the paramedic shouted. I watched as they wheeled him out. The red and blue lights of the ambulance and the police cars flashed through the open doors, painting the ballroom in a chaotic strobe effect. I stood alone in the center of the room. The investors were watching me. The staff was watching me. I turned to Marcus, who was standing by the stage waiting for orders. "Clear the room, Marcus," I said quietly. "Send everyone home. And call the cleaning crew. I want this place scrubbed. I want every trace of them gone by morning." Marcus nodded. "You got it, boss." I walked toward the exit, not following the ambulance, not following the police cars, but walking toward my own car. The night air was humid and thick. I took a deep breath. It did not smell like rain or despair anymore. It smelled like victory. I had signed the papers. I had sent my brother to a cell and my father to a hospital ward. I should have felt guilty. That is what society tells women to feel. We are supposed to be the nurturers, the forgivers, the ones who absorb the pain to keep the family whole. But as I watched the ambulance siren fade into the distance, I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. I checked my reflection in the window of the Mercedes. The red suit was impeccable. My makeup was flawless. There were no tears in my eyes. The King family was dead. Long live the Queen. Đây là phần cuối cùng của kịch bản. Chương 15. Vương triều. Mới được viết chi tiết bằng tiếng Anh, tuân thủ đúng giọng văn Voice AI, liên mạch, không tiêu đề, không ký tự đặc biệt như bạn yêu cầu. 30 days after the gala, the sun rose over Atlanta with a clarity that felt almost supernatural. The humidity had broken, and the air was crisp and clean, much like the ledger of the company formerly known as King Logistics. From my office on the 45th floor, I watched the city wake up, but today I did not feel like a predator waiting in the grass. I felt like a builder standing on a solid foundation. The sign on the building had been changed. It no longer said King Logistics. It read the Otis and Viola Group. I had erased my father's name from the skyline and replaced it with the names of the two people who actually built the legacy. My morning began not with a crisis, but with a report from the prison board. My brother Trey had entered a plea deal. Facing 20 years for wire fraud and embezzlement, he had folded like a cheap suit. He pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a 5-year sentence in a minimum security federal facility. 5 years to think about the difference between being a boss and being a leader. I saw the mugshot attached to the file. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his skin tone, a petty observation perhaps, but satisfying nonetheless. I closed the file and drove to the outskirts of the city. My first stop was a diner called the Rusty Spoon. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the clientele consisted of truck drivers and construction workers, people who worked with their hands for a living. I sat in a booth in the back and waited. 10 minutes later she appeared. Brittany. She was wearing a stained apron and comfortable shoes. Her hair, which used to be blown out to perfection every morning, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired. She looked aged. When she walked over to my table with a pot of coffee, she didn't recognize me at first. I was just another customer. "Coffee, hun?" she asked, staring at her notepad. "I will take it black," I said. She froze. The pot shook in her hand, rattling against the ceramic mug. She looked up slowly. Her eyes widened. "Zola," she whispered, looking around nervously, as if I had brought the police with me. "What are you doing here? Are you here to gloat?" I looked at her. I looked at the cheap uniform. I looked at the broken nails. "No, Brittany," I said softly. "I am just checking on my former employees. I heard the legal fees took everything." "Everything," she hissed, leaning in. "They took the condo. They took the jewelry. Even the fake necklace. My parents won't speak to me. I have nothing, Zola. I am serving eggs to people I used to look down on." "It is honest work," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. "It builds character. Something you never had the chance to develop." She glared at me, tears pricking her eyes. "I hate you." "I know," I said, placing a $100 bill on the table. "Keep the change." And Brittany tried to smile more. "It helps with the tips." I walked out, leaving her staring at the money. It was the last time I would ever think about her. She was no longer a villain in my story, just a footnote. My next stop was a facility called Shady Oaks. It was a mid-range assisted living center. It was clean, and the staff was competent, but it was a far cry from the luxury my father had envisioned for his retirement. There were no golf courses, no cigar lounges, just bingo nights and communal meals. I walked down the hallway, which smelled faintly of antiseptic and boiled vegetables. I found Reginald King in room 304. He was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at the parking lot. The stroke at the gala had been mild physically, but it had devastated him mentally. He had lost his speech for a week, and though it had returned, his spirit remained broken. He turned when I entered. He looked small. The giant who had terrified me for 32 years had shrunk into a fragile old man. "Zola," he croaked, "you came." I did not sit down. I stood at the foot of his bed, holding a manila folder. "I brought the papers, Dad," I said. He looked at the folder. He knew what was inside. "Divorce papers," he whispered. "She is really doing it, after 40 years. "She is," I said. "She has already signed them. She just needs your signature to make it final." My father looked out the window again. "Where is she? Why didn't she bring them herself?" "Because she is busy packing," I said. "And because she doesn't answer to you anymore. You signed away her rights to the estate, Dad. You thought you were stripping her of power, but you actually stripped her of obligation. She is free." He took the pen with a shaking hand. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He just signed his name, Reginald King. It was a weak scrawl, a shadow of the signature he used to wield like a weapon. "Is there anything else?" he asked, handing the folder back. "Are you going to take my pension too?" "No," I said. "The company will cover your stay here. It is a standard package for retired employees." You will be comfortable, Dad. You will have a roof and food, which is more than you gave me when you kicked me out in the rain." He flinched. The memory clearly haunted him. "I made a mistake," he said softly. "I bet on the wrong horse." "You didn't just bet on the wrong horse, Dad," I said, turning to leave. "You tried to shoot the jockey." I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. The cord was cut. I drove straight to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I found my mother Viola waiting at the international terminal. She looked breathtaking. She was wearing a trench coat and a silk scarf, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look like she was shrinking. She looked like she took up space. She saw me and smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "Did he sign?" she asked, hugging me. "He signed," I said, handing her the folder. "You are a free woman, Mom." She took a deep breath, inhaling the air of the terminal as if it were mountain breeze. "I cannot believe it," she said. "Paris. I have wanted to go since I was 20. I handed her the envelope containing her first-class ticket and the deed to a small apartment in the Latin Quarter. "It is yours, Mom," I said. "Not a loan, not a gift with strings attached. It is your dividend. From Lioness LLC. You earned it." She looked at the ticket and tears welled up in her eyes. "Zola," she said, cupping my face, "I am so proud of you. Not because you won, but because you didn't let them turn you into him. You stayed you." "Go catch your flight, Mom," I said, kissing her cheek. "Send me a postcard from the Louvre." I watched her walk through security. She didn't look back. She walked with a bounce in her step, a woman finally living her own life. I drove back to the estate. The sun was setting now, casting a golden glow over the limestone pillars. The gate opened for me, automatically recognizing my car. The dumpster was gone. The lawn was being replanted. The house was quiet. I walked into the library. It was finished. I had spent the last week restoring it. The cheap yoga mats and mirrors Brittany had installed were gone. The mahogany shelves were back. And the books. Thousands of them were returned to their rightful places. I walked over to the shelf where the jazz record sat. I pulled out Kind of Blue and placed it on the turntable. The soft crackle of the needle hitting the vinyl filled the room, followed by the mournful, beautiful notes of the trumpet. I sat down in Grandpa Otis' leather armchair. It smelled of old paper and tobacco. It smelled like home. On the desk in front of me sat the black envelope, the one my mother had given me in the rain. It was empty now. The documents inside had been executed. The weapon had been fired. I picked up the empty envelope. It felt light. I took a pen and wrote a single sentence on the back of it. Then I propped it up against the lamp. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the music wash over me. I thought about Trey in his cell. I thought about Brittany in her diner. I thought about Dad in his wheelchair. And I thought about Mom flying over the Atlantic. They had all chased something. Money, status, approval, control. And they had all lost it. I opened my eyes and looked at the words I had written on the envelope. The final lesson. The truth that had cost me a family but gained me a future. Legacy is not what is given, it is what we keep. I took a sip of my tea and smiled. The library was warm. The house was safe. And for the first time in the history of the King family, the throne was occupied by someone who deserved it. Zola's journey teaches us that true legacy is not defined by bloodline or entitlement, but by integrity and the strength to stand alone. For years she was underestimated, but she never allowed their perception to become her reality. Her story is a powerful reminder that we cannot wait for validation from those committed to misunderstanding us. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their own actions. Real power isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your narrative, protecting your peace, and understanding that your worth is non-negotiable, even when your family refuses to see it. Have you ever had to choose between your mental peace and your family's approval? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If Zola's strength inspired you, Please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice. Remember, you are the author of your own life.